Parker Knight was never late. Not for boardroom takeovers, not for private jet departures, and definitely not for keynote speeches at international tech conferences. But this morning, Manhattan traffic had other plans. He checked his silver Rolex again. Unbelievable, he muttered, tugging at the collar of his navy suit as the winter wind slapped his face. His private town car had broken down 5 blocks from the hotel, and with the street gridlocked and time ticking down fast, he did something he hadn't done since business school. He hailed a taxi. Just as one pulled up, a woman darted from the other side of the street, arm raised. They reached the door at the same time. "Oh no, please," she said breathlessly, eyes wide. "I really need this cab." "So do I," Parker replied, voice tight but polite. "I'm late for a conference." "I'm late for a job interview," she said, her hand on the door. "If I miss it, I miss rent. And then I miss living indoors." Parker paused. Her tone wasn't dramatic, it was just honest. She looked up at him, her cheeks flushed from the cold, hair a little windblown, and something in her expression equal parts determination and panic made him speak without thinking. "Where are you headed?" "Midtown. 42nd and Lexington. I'm going to the Javits Center." "Close enough. We'll share." She blinked. "Really?" He opened the door. "Get in before I change my mind." They climbed in, and Parker gave the driver both addresses. As the cab pulled into traffic, the woman exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. "Thank you? Seriously. That was decent of you." "I have my moments," he said, tapping his knee nervously. "I'm Fallon Kent." He glanced sideways. "Parker." "Just Parker?" "For now." She gave a small laugh. "Mysterious." "Okay, just Parker, thanks again. You might have saved my life or at least my week." He gave a half smile, watching her tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. She was wearing a cheap wool coat, the buttons mismatched, and her boots had seen better winters. But she sat tall, no trace of shame, just quiet resilience. "So what's this interview?" he asked, more curious than he expected. "Office assistant. Temp agency got me a last-minute spot. Not glamorous, but it pays. That's honest work." She tilted her head. "You sound surprised." "I'm not. Just. You seem like you should be doing something bigger." Fallon shrugged. "Maybe someday. Right now, I just need a paycheck." Traffic inched forward, then stopped again. Fallon glanced at her phone, worry creasing her forehead. "Great. I'm going to be late." Parker leaned forward. "Driver, take her stop first." "But I'll make it work. Get her there fast." The driver nodded, switching lanes. Fallon looked at him. "You don't even know me. Why would you do that?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I've made it a habit to invest in potential. And you seem like someone who doesn't quit." Her eyes softened. "Well, thanks. For the ride and the compliment." Minutes later, the cab screeched in front of a glass office building. Fallon grabbed the handle, then hesitated. "I hope your conference goes well, Parker." He nodded. "Good luck, Fallon." She stepped out, then turned and leaned back in. "Also, I was totally going to fight you for this cab. Like full-on New York brawl." He laughed. "I believe you." Then she disappeared into the building. The driver pulled back into traffic, and Parker sat back, staring out the window as the city blurred past. He should have been reviewing his speech. Instead, he kept thinking about Fallon. Her voice. Her eyes. He arrived at the Javits Center 10 minutes late. His team was panicked, his assistants sweating bullets, but Parker didn't care. For once, being late felt like the best decision he'd made all week. The conference was a blur. He delivered the keynote half on autopilot, fielded questions, shook hands, posed for photos. But even with the applause and praise, his mind kept drifting back to the cab. To her. The rest of the week passed, but Parker couldn't shake her from his thoughts. He found himself walking past that office building twice, hoping ridiculously that maybe he'd see her. He didn't. Until Friday morning. He was grabbing a black coffee from a street cart near Bryant Park when he heard her voice. "Let me guess, still late for something?" He turned, startled. Fallon stood behind him, holding a paper bag and a coffee of her own. She looked just as he remembered, maybe a little more tired, maybe a little more determined. He smiled. "Not late today. Just in the mood for street coffee." She stepped beside him. "Guess what? I got the job." "Of course you did. I start Monday." She paused. "I've been meaning to say thank you again. You didn't have to share that taxi." "I'm glad I did." They stood in the middle of the sidewalk, people rushing around them. "Would you let me buy you a coffee?" he asked. "You already bought me half a cab ride." "Then let's call this even." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. But only if we sit on a bench, and you tell me what you really do." "Deal." They sat in the park, sipping bitter coffee and talking. She told him about her sister back in Ohio, about working 2 jobs to stay in the city. He told her a little about his company, skipped the part where he was the founder and CEO of one of the biggest tech firms in the country. He didn't want her to see dollar signs. He wanted her to see him. And she did. When they said goodbye, he watched her walk away, heart pounding in a way that felt unfamiliar and dangerous. He was in trouble. Because Fallon Kent wasn't just a stranger he'd shared a taxi with. She was going to change everything. "I don't get it," Fallon said, standing on the sidewalk outside a corner diner, eyeing Parker with narrowed suspicion. "You're too well dressed to be wandering midtown with street coffee like the rest of us." Parker raised a brow. "Is that your way of saying I look out of place?" "It's my way of saying I'm not buying the just Parker routine anymore," she replied, crossing her arms. "What do you actually do?" He took a breath, then tilted his head slightly. "How about I tell you over breakfast?" She hesitated, eyes flicking toward the diner's fogged windows. "Fine. But if you're secretly trying to sell me real estate or pitch a pyramid scheme, I'm walking." "Noted." Inside, the diner was warm and smelled of bacon and burnt toast. They slid into a booth near the back. Fallon shrugged off her coat, revealing a navy blouse with a tiny stain near the hem. She tried to casually cover it with her napkin. Parker didn't comment. He was too busy noticing how she sat shoulders square, chin up, as if daring the world to underestimate her. A waitress came by, poured coffee, and took their orders. Fallon pointed at the cheapest item on the menu. Parker didn't even look, he simply said, "The usual," and handed over his card before she could blink. "Wait, you have a usual here?" Fallon asked after the waitress walked away. "I've been coming here since college. The owner still calls me kid." "I don't correct her." She leaned forward. "College. That's a clue." "Where?" "Stanford. Computer science." Her brows lifted. "Okay, now I'm intrigued. So you're either a coder or a tech guy who sold an app and bought a yacht." "I've never bought a yacht." "But you could." He didn't answer. She sat back, staring at him. "You're not going to tell me, are you?" "I will," he said quietly. "Just not today." "So mysterious." She mumbled, shaking her head, but she didn't press. The food arrived. She ignored her eggs and studied him between bites of toast. "You always this hard to read?" "Only when I'm trying not to scare someone off." "Why would you scare me off?" He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "Because I'm used to people wanting something from me. Not talking to me like this. Like I'm just a guy in a diner." She blinked, caught off guard. "You're a lot more intense than I expected. You're a lot more honest than I'm used to." They finished eating in silence, both aware the mood had shifted, the air heavier now, more curious than casual. When they stepped outside, Fallon hesitated before saying, "Thanks. For breakfast. Even if you're still hiding what you do." He glanced at the street. "Do you have plans this weekend?" I have laundry, a broken space heater, and a roommate who thinks unpaid improv gigs count as rent. He laughed, the first real laugh she'd heard from him. It made his face relax, his posture loosen. I meant Saturday night. There's an art gallery opening in Soho. Thought you might like it. She looked at him. What kind of art? Modern. Weird. Expensive. She considered. I don't know if I have anything to wear to something like that. I'll send something to your apartment. Excuse me? Her brows shot up. A dress. Shoes. Whatever you need. She stepped back. That's insanely presumptuous. I didn't mean it to be. Just. He ran a hand through his hair. I want to take you somewhere nice. You deserve it. She studied him for a long beat. Fine. But only if I get to pick the cab this time. Deal. He pulled out a sleek black card and held it toward her. Write your address. She blinked. You carry a pen like that around? I carry a lot of things around. She took the card, scribbled quickly, then handed it back. If a stranger shows up with a dress that costs more than my rent, I'm out. Understood. She turned to go, paused, then glanced back. You're weird, Parker. I hear that a lot. By the time she disappeared down the block, he was already on the phone with his assistant. I need a gown delivered. Elegant, but not flashy. Send shoes in 2 sizes. And have it there by 4. There was a pause on the other end. Just do it, he added before hanging up. That night, Fallon opened her door to find 3 long boxes and a handwritten envelope leaning against her apartment wall. Inside was a dark velvet gown, heels that made her nervous just looking at them, and a note. I didn't choose the green one. You're welcome. She stared at the note for a long time before folding it and tucking it into her nightstand drawer. Saturday came with sleet and slush, but Parker arrived in a black town car with a driver who opened the door like she was royalty. She slipped inside, careful not to let the hem of her dress drag through the snow. You clean up well, he said, eyes sweeping over her. You're lucky I didn't wear combat boots just to spite you. I would have admired your commitment. The gallery in Soho was packed with glass sculptures and people who spoke in half-whispers. Fallon tried not to stare at the price tags. Parker moved through the crowd like he belonged, which, of course, he did. She caught snippets of conversation as they walked. That's Parker Knight, someone whispered. Fallon froze. Knight, she repeated under her breath. As in Night Soft? He turned toward her slowly, caught. You're the Parker Knight? He didn't deny it. She stared at him, then turned, walked away, and made it 3 steps before he caught her hand. Fallon, you let me embarrass myself. You let me think you were just some guy. I never lied to you. You let me pay for half a cab, she said, voice cracking. You let me think we were equals. We are. She yanked her hand away. No, we're not. You're a billionaire CEO. I'm a temp with a 10-day contract and a heater that sounds like it's dying. He stood there, people whispering around him, eyes locked on hers. I didn't tell you because I liked who I was with you, he said quietly. Not the name. Not the company. Just me. She looked at him, breath trembling. I have to go, she whispered. Fallon, please don't. But she was already walking away. And for the first time in years, Parker Knight stood in a room full of people and felt completely, utterly alone. Fallon hadn't expected to cry in a laundromat. But there she was, sitting on a cracked plastic chair as her clothes tumbled behind glass, eyes burning and throat tight. It wasn't the revelation that Parker Knight was a billionaire. It was the fact that he'd let her believe he was something else. Someone else. The dress, the gallery, the way people had looked at him, it all felt like a setup she hadn't known she was walking into. She'd felt foolish, like a line in a script she never auditioned for. And worst of all, she'd liked him. Not the powerful CEO version, but the man who'd shared a coffee and listened when she talked. She rubbed her hands together to chase away the chill, then glanced down at the folded note still in her coat pocket. She should have thrown it out days ago. Instead, she kept rereading it like it had answers. A dryer buzzed behind her. She stood up quickly, needing movement. Needing something to keep her mind from looping the same questions. Across town, Parker stared at his untouched dinner as the city lights blinked behind his windows. His penthouse stretched out around him, glass, steel, silence. His phone vibrated. He didn't look. He knew it was his assistant confirming the dinner he was supposed to attend, the one with investors and a senator's daughter who'd been seated beside him at too many events. He wasn't going. Instead, he walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and leaned his forehead against the glass. Fallon had walked away without asking for anything, not an explanation, not even a car home. She hadn't flinched at his title. She'd been hurt because he hadn't trusted her with the truth. And he couldn't stop thinking about how her voice had cracked when she said, "You let me think we were equals." He turned away from the window and crossed the room. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a plain white envelope, the one her address had been written on. He hadn't thrown it away. He never had a reason. Until now. The next morning, Fallon arrived at the office early. She still had 6 more days on her contract, and she wasn't about to lose them. She kept her head down, filed documents, proofread reports, and ignored the buzzing curiosity from the other temps who had seen her photos in that velvet dress, photos that had somehow ended up on a gossip blog. She hadn't even known they'd been taken until her roommate shoved her phone in her face over breakfast. "You're dating Parker freaking night?" "That's not what it was," Fallon had said, brushing past it. "And it's over." Now, as she slipped into the copy room to escape the chatter, the door opened behind her. "Fallon Kent?" She turned, surprised. A man in a sleek gray suit stood in the doorway, holding a sealed envelope. "Delivery for you. Personal." Fallon took it cautiously. "Thanks." The man nodded once, then disappeared. Inside the envelope was a single folded sheet of thick paper. "Dinner. Just you and me. No titles. No suits. Just answers." The handwriting was the same as the note that had come with the dress. She stared at it for a long time. That night, Fallon stood outside a quiet brick townhouse in the West Village, her coat wrapped tight and nerves tangled up in her stomach. The doorman let her in without a word. Inside, the space smelled like pine and old wood polish, a far cry from the cold glass of a penthouse. Parker opened the door to the second floor himself. He wasn't in a suit. No tie. Just a dark sweater and jeans. "Hi," he said, voice low. She stepped inside, cautious. "Where are we?" "My grandfather's old place. I keep it for the days when the rest of my life feels too loud." She hung her coat and followed him into a room lined with books and worn leather chairs. A fire crackled in the grate. He gestured to the table set for 2. "I cooked." Fallon blinked. "You cooked?" "I had help," he admitted. "But I set the table." They sat. The food was simple pasta, bread, wine. The opposite of extravagant. It was the first time she'd seen him look uncertain. He didn't touch his glass. Instead, he looked at her. "I should have told you the truth. That night at the diner, I almost did. But I like being someone you didn't have to second-guess." "I didn't second-guess you," she said quietly. "That's the problem. I trusted you. And then suddenly I was in a room full of strangers who all knew who you were, and all I knew was your first name." Parker leaned forward. "I didn't bring you there to parade you around. I brought you because I wanted to share something with you. Something real. You don't get to decide what's real for both of us." He nodded slowly. "You're right." They sat in silence for a beat. "Why me?" she asked finally. "You could be with anyone. Because you told me the truth about your life without flinching. Because you weren't impressed by my watch or my car. Because when I said I was late, you didn't ask for a favor, you asked for a seat in the cab." She didn't answer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. This place is yours if you ever need somewhere quiet. I won't be here. You won't owe me anything. But if the heater breaks again or life just feels too loud. Fallon stared at the key. You're giving me a townhouse? I'm offering you a way to breathe. She reached out, touched the key, but didn't take it. I don't need a way to breathe, Parker. I need to know you see me. Not someone to impress or protect. I do. Then stop trying to rescue me. He stood silently, then stepped back. I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I'm asking you to let me try again. With no tricks. No limos. Just this. Fallon looked around the quiet room, the worn books, the firelight dancing against the walls. It wasn't the money that unnerved her, it was how easily he could step into something real and still not understand how fragile that space was for someone like her. She stood up. I'm not saying yes, she said. But I'm not walking away either. That night, as she left the townhouse, Fallon didn't take the key. Not yet. But she didn't throw it away either. Fallon stood in the elevator of the Nightsoft building, surrounded by men in sharp suits and women carrying leather portfolios, all moving with purpose, all belonging. She adjusted the sleeve of her blazer, the same one she'd worn to her interview weeks ago, and stared at the blinking floor numbers. This time she wasn't here as a temp. This time, she had an appointment personally scheduled on the top floor. The glass doors opened to a reception area unlike anything she'd ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, and the air smelled faintly of citrus and fresh orchids. Behind the curved marble desk, the assistant greeted her without surprise. Miss Kent, he's expecting you. She stepped inside Parker's office, heart steady but guarded. He stood by the window, his jacket off, sleeves rolled, looking out over the city like he was trying to find something in it. He turned as she entered. You came. You asked? She crossed the room, stopping a few feet from his desk. Why here? Because this, he said, gesturing around them, is the part of my life I've always kept separate. I wanted you to see it. No distractions. No curated dinner tables or borrowed fireplaces. She looked around. You run half the city from this room. Not half. Just enough to forget what silence sounds like. She took a breath. Parker, I'm not intimidated by what you've built. But I need to know where I fit in it. Not as a guest. Not as a secret. You're not a secret, he said. But if I asked you to stay in my world, I had to show you all of it. Not just the part that wears sweaters and lights fires. Fallon stepped closer. Then stop showing me rooms. Show me where I belong. His eyes met hers, and something cracked open between them, clean, sharp, honest. I had the boardroom cleared. They think I'm in Dubai today, he said, walking to the wall and pressing a button. The window tint shifted, darkening the glass. I needed space. Just us. Is this where you usually negotiate? He smiled faintly. Only when it matters. She sat across from him, folding her hands. So. Negotiate. I want you in my life. All of it. Not hidden, not managed. But I don't want to ask you to change. I want to build something with you that makes space for both of us. Fallon raised an eyebrow. Even if I still take the subway and don't know what half the forks on that art gallery table were for? Especially then. She leaned back, watching him. You don't get scared easily, do you? I do now. Why? Because I've never had anything I couldn't buy, fix, or outmaneuver. But I can't force you to trust me again. She was quiet for a moment. The first time I met you, you were just a guy in a suit fighting for a cab. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't try to impress me. You just made space. He nodded once, listening. I don't need a townhouse or a dress that comes in a velvet box. I need that space again. The one where I get to be seen without being saved. He walked around the desk and sat beside her. Then let's start there. Fallon pulled a small folded paper from her blazer pocket. She laid it on the desk. I signed the offer. Your HR rep sent it this morning. His eyebrows lifted. You're accepting the job? I am. But not because I want to be close to you. Because I earned it. Because I'm good at it. And because I want a seat at the table that doesn't depend on who I'm dating. He reached for the paper, but she held it down. With one condition. Name it. No special treatment. No private elevators. No corner office because you're trying to make a point. I want to earn everything. You already have, he said. But I'll agree. She let him take the paper. Later that evening, Fallon stood in her apartment, packing the last of her things into boxes. Her roommate was moving in with her improv troupe in Queens, and the lease was ending. She hadn't taken the townhouse key, but Parker had quietly offered something else, an apartment a few blocks from her new office, modest by his standards, but offered on a lease she could afford and in her name alone. She'd accepted. As she taped up the last box, her phone rang. She answered on speaker. Hey, Parker's voice came through. Hey, I'm downstairs. Fallon walked to the window and peered out. He wasn't in a limo. He was leaning against a dusty old sedan, holding 2 paper cups. She laughed. You brought street coffee? You said no special treatment. She grabbed her coat and headed down. Outside, the air was sharp with spring's early chill. He handed her a cup. I thought you hated this stuff. I do, he said. But it still reminds me of the first time I saw you smile. They walked in silence for a few blocks. Then Fallon nudged him with her shoulder. I'm making you dinner tomorrow, she said. But I only have 1 pan. I've survived worse. And the smoke detector's sensitive. I'm not afraid of alarms. They stopped at a crosswalk. Fallon turned to him. You know this is going to be hard sometimes. I don't want easy, he said. I want real. She leaned up and kissed him, not with hesitation, but with certainty. When they pulled apart, the light changed, and they crossed the street together. That weekend, Parker sat on a barstool in Fallon's tiny kitchen, watching her burn the edges of grilled cheese with the focus of a heart surgeon. The smoke alarm blared, they laughed, and he cracked open a window. It was messy. It was imperfect. It was theirs. And in the quiet that followed, as they curled up on her worn couch with mismatched socks and cold sandwiches, Parker Knight realized he hadn't just found love in the back of a taxi. He'd found the one person who saw every part of him and chose to stay. Fallon adjusted the waistband of her charcoal dress slacks and checked her reflection in the elevator mirror. Her new ID badge caught the light, clipped just below her collar. Executive Projects Coordinator Knight Soft. It still felt surreal, like she was borrowing someone else's life, but the weight of it was real enough. She'd earned this. When the elevator opened to the executive floor, she stepped into the rhythm of the day without hesitation. She passed assistants hunched over dual monitors, analysts murmuring in hushed voices, and Parker's office door already wide open. She didn't stop. She wouldn't be the woman who hovered at his threshold. She had a meeting to run. Her team, 3 junior associates, 1 senior analyst, and a rotating intern were already seated when she entered the glass-walled conference room on the east side of the building. The view was dizzying, but she barely glanced at it. Let's begin, she said, flipping open her binder. We've got a deadline to crush. The day passed in a blur of strategy sessions, market analysis, and project outlines. She felt the pulse of the company now, not from the outside looking in, but from the center of it. No one whispered about Parker when she walked by anymore. No one looked at her like she didn't belong. When her final meeting ended, she closed her laptop and stretched. A soft knock sounded at the glass door. Parker leaned in. You're coming with me. She tilted her head. I have reports due. They can wait. Trust me. She followed him out of the office, down the back corridor to a private stairwell she hadn't used before. They descended 1 flight, then stepped through a narrow door into a rooftop garden she didn't know existed. String lights crisscrossed overhead, casting a warm glow over the ivy-covered trellises and sleek wooden benches. A table for two sat in the center, already set. "You've had this the whole time?" she asked, stunned. He pulled out a chair for her. "It's usually locked. I wanted this place to mean something before I brought you here." She sat slowly, taking in the unexpected beauty of it, the gentle hum of the city below, the scent of rosemary and lavender from the raised beds, the quiet intimacy of it all. "This is hidden. So are the best things," he said, pouring her a glass of wine. "I used to come here when I needed to remember why I started this company. Before the boardrooms. Before the investors. Just me and a prototype and a dream that didn't fit inside four walls." She looked at him, intrigued. "What was it like? When it all took off?" "Terrifying," he said without hesitation. "I built something bigger than I could control. And for a while, I let it control me instead. You don't seem like someone who loses control." "I do. When I care too much." She touched her glass but didn't lift it. "And now?" He met her gaze. "Now I care for the right reasons." They ate quietly, the comfort between them growing stronger with every shared glance and unspoken thought. When dessert arrived, simple honey cake with orange blossom whipped cream, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a slim velvet box. Her breath caught. "Are you seriously proposing to me on a rooftop next to a rosemary bush?" He laughed, setting the box down. "No. I'm not proposing. Not yet. But I am giving you something." She opened it to find a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant in the shape of an open door. He explained before she could ask. "Because you opened one for me. Into a world where I could be more than my name. Where I could be real." Her fingers closed around the pendant. "I didn't do that," she said quietly. "You did. I just didn't run when I saw it." "I love you, Fallon," he said, no fanfare, no build-up, just truth. "Not because you challenge me or because you don't care about the money. I love you because you make me want to be better. Because you say things that scare me and then stand still while I figure them out." She stepped toward him, and wrapped her arms around him. "I love you too," she said into his chest. "Even when you're frustrating. Especially then." He held her tightly, then pulled back just enough to kiss her, the kind of kiss that says "I'm home now." Weeks passed. Their rhythm settled, mornings tangled in sheets and coffee mugs, days filled with strategy sessions and quiet textless glances across meeting rooms, evenings spent cooking, arguing about pasta doneness, choosing furniture that was both hers and his. Fallon's new apartment came together slowly. She insisted on picking every item herself, Parker only stepping in when she pointed him toward the checkout page. He never pushed. Never hovered. Just showed up with takeout when she was too tired to cook and read aloud from classic novels while she unpacked boxes. One Saturday morning, she woke to find him sitting at her tiny kitchen table, newspaper folded beside him, a mug of tea in hand. "I have a question," he said, looking up. She yawned. "Is it about breakfast?" "No. It's about a year from now. And 5 years after that." She leaned on the doorway, hair a mess, wearing one of his old t-shirts. "Okay. I want to build a life with you. Something solid. Something that doesn't need penthouses or press releases. Just us. I thought we were already doing that." "We are," he said. "But I want to put a name on it. I want to marry you." She froze. Not because she was surprised, but because she realized deep in her bones that she wanted it too. Not the ceremony, not the ring. Him. Every messy, driven, complicated piece of him. "Yes," she said. "But only if we do it our way." He stood and crossed to her, lifting her hand to his lips. "Always our way." 6 months later, they stood barefoot on a cliffside in Big Sur, surrounded by a dozen people who mattered and no one else. She wore a dress she'd found in a vintage shop. He wore a linen shirt and no tie. The vows were whispered over wind and waves, promises made without microphones or cameras. As they kissed, the sun dipped low over the Pacific, casting gold across their faces. And just like that, Fallon Kent, who once fought for a cab to make rent, became Fallon Knight, not because she needed saving, but because she'd found a partner who saw her as his equal and chose her every single time. They danced under string lights, ate cake with their fingers, and toasted with cheap champagne and full hearts. And when they returned to the city, to the messy apartment with the squeaky floorboard and the windows that stuck in summer, they didn't long for castles or silence. They had each other. And that was more than enough.